Many Christians in the United States are rightfully concerned over the path that the country has taken, especially when one considers the amount of immigration that has been allowed by our superiors in Washington, D.C., and at the state and local governments throughout the ensuing decades, especially when you consider that there is an element that is an outright hostile religion against Christianity, and we're talking about Islam. Now, I know there's been some commentary, especially from some top name commentators in conservative circles, who have said that the concerns over the Islamification of America are overblown, that there are other concerns that the country should have before we concern ourselves with what Muslims are attempting to do in the United States. We have a difference of opinion because when you read the texts from the Islamists, when you discover what their plans are for wherever they land and they wish to expand their religion, we happen to think that it's not a one or nothing proposition. We happen to think that it's an all or nothing proposition with respect to defending not only Christianity, but the nation that was sprouted from it, from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And let us tell you something. One of those enemies against a nation that was germinated by Christians and for Christians is none other than Islam. Yes, there's a lot to say about Judaism. We have talked about it before. We will continue talking about it in the future. But one thing that has necessarily taken the background in all of this is how very, shall we say, subtly behind the scenes, Islam continues to grow and it continues to be a problem in the United States. And we have to ask the question, will we see that future, a future in the United States where Islam, as it were, would be the overriding religion, the thing that dictates policy and the way that people behave and the way that people view things? Some of you might think these concerns are overblown. However, with the evidences that we will give you this evening in our comments, I think we'll be able to prove that it's something that Christians not only need to concern themselves with, they have to actively work against, not only in the immediate future, but also in the distant future. Welcome each and every one of you to this new edition of Irrespective. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, we are the co-belligerent hosts of this podcast series. Why do we call ourselves belligerents? Well, because we've been told on more than one occasion that our views and our comments and the way that we happen to see things is not only supposedly antithetical to the secular order, we've had Christians tell us that we are necessarily belligerent to the so-called, what they call, Christian cause. We beg to differ. Anyways, my name is Gio, and this is Jesus.
Good evening, friends. I invite you to call me a racist, a xenophobe, and all the other things that typically are used these days to silence people. I'm going to rewind a little bit in my opening statement here to a time, a season, a place that saw me visit a place, well, not visit, I was there studying, Miami-Dade Junior College, the North Campus. It's rained a bit since then, by the way. But I recall encountering my first person who told me that he was an Arab and that he was studying here in the States and that he was marrying an American woman, and the hopes was that he would be able to marry this woman and stay in the country. Now, way back then also when I was in college, there was an actor who was very popular. The name was Omar Sharif. And the propaganda around Omar Sharif was that Arab lovers were fantastic. We Americans have been gullible, very gullible. When it comes to Hollywood telling us how to think, we have eaten the pie. We've taken not just a sip, but gallons worth of their Kool-Aid. And then we get these ideas working in our society, and we wonder, where did we get them from? We get a lot of them from Hollywood. So if you start adding up the points that I'm trying to bring across here, you will see that the invasion, yes, the invasion of the Muslim mentality not only started to happen many years ago, but they were using different ways to get themselves into the country. And once in the country, they would establish themselves through the freedom of religion that we have here in this country. And now we are, in my opinion, at a crossroads. We are at a place in time where if we don't sound the alarms and put a stop to the progress, uh, the Muslims are going to get away, and they are getting away with a lot of stuff in this country.
Absolutely. We have more to explain on the matter, but first and foremost, some housekeeping items. If you have not yet subscribed, irrespective, pun intended, where you're watching this, YouTube, Rumble, or X, we would ask you, we would implore you to subscribe, excuse me, to hit the notification bell, to share our content with others, and please click on the thumbs up button. The more organic interest there is in the content, the more the algorithms will pick up on that organic interest and share our content with others. But would also help us immensely if you personally were to repost our content. For those of you that have been doing so, for example, on Gab and other places, I thank you. We thank you for doing that. Do not forget to interact with us. The chat is open on YouTube and on Rumble, and we will read those chats as they come in. And if you are on YouTube, please interact with us. We will place that chat on the screen. Do not forget to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that you can scan with your phone. Conversely, there's a link beneath in the description box underneath the video player that you can click on. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on X. Our handle there is Irrespective77, Irrespective77. Have our first chat here from Yenis. Greetings, God bless you. Likewise to Yenis. Allow me to lay down the following idea or rather a foundational understanding for our audience. One of the things that you were talking about is how Americans have unfortunately, and I think that's the proper term here, have unfortunately received their views from Hollywood without understanding that all of this has a genesis.
We've become a very, very gullible people. And this is not just recent. This goes back decades.
Then you have to ask yourself, and the audience has to ask itself, whom are the main drivers of these ideas through Hollywood productions? And by the way, we're not just singling out Hollywood. The media, government types, and other associated entities have had a lot to do with propagating an idea.
The educational system.
Exactly. All culprits in the matter of advancing an idea which inherently subverts Christianity. We've talked about it before. It's called the post-war consensus. For those of you that want a more complete, a thorough analysis of who were the primary drivers of this idea, Karl Popper, his disciple George Soros, and others, we would implore you to look into our episode series just a couple of months ago where we talked about how Karl Popper, George Soros, and others, they disseminated the idea of an open society. The inherent problem with the post-war consensus is that the ideas that are advanced hijack certain concepts from Christianity and turns them on their heads, where now it turns out to be detrimental against Christianity. I'll repeat that again. The post-war consensus, it's the consensus, the ideas, the notions that have been peddled, like you were saying, through Hollywood, through the educational system. Politicians have advanced it. All of the major conglomerates which have something to do with advancing certain ideas, the media, they have advanced what is known as the post-war consensus. And in it, it says you have to be open, meaning you have to have openness. You have to receive everyone and be accepting of their ideas so that you can have peace. It's a sort of ecumenical thought process. The essential problem with that is that we as Christians, especially in a nation that was founded by Christians and for their offspring, for Christians, that cuts against the grain of what Christianity is all about, because we are called to be exclusivist. Well, Gio, when you say we are called to be exclusivist, aren't you necessarily undercutting Jesus' idea that we should go preach the gospel? That's not what I mean. What I mean by exclusivist is that we shouldn't simply say you are welcome in our midst, your ideas are welcome in our midst, when the Bible calls that very idea, if a Christian were to do that, spiritual adultery. James denominates that.
Rick Warren's ideas, which were at a point in time called Chrislam,
which he tried to lie and say that he wasn't promoting, but he was promoting.
Absolutely. And you see how Warren, he created a lot of space for himself within, let's call it the Christian community, with the purpose-driven life, purpose-driven church. A lot of Sunday schools dropped their programs to incorporate purpose-driven church, purpose-driven life. And he was one that was pushing, we need to have a dialogue with these people. And the problem with dialogue is that when you squeeze the thing, when you examine it, you'll notice that there really is no dialogue. It's a one-way conversation. And we, the Christians, are always the yielding party, the welcoming party. And then when we look up again, we have been splattered on the floor. And so when we talk about Rick Warren, we are talking about somebody that allowed a lot of the Islam idea of let him in and bring him in and let's embrace him and let's have a conversation. And a lot of Christians fell for that. And I'll go back just for one more second, Gio, with the idea of what was happening in college where Arab men, Muslim men were marrying American women and what was going on with television and the movies, and say that that also became very, very popular. I've seen different cultures invade the U.S. mentality, most especially, again, call me racist, call me whatever you want to, but I've seen a lot of American women embrace certain ideas and certain trends where at this time in space, we want to be with Latinos, and this time in space, we want to be with Arab. At this time in space, we want to be with black men. I've seen these waves.
A lot of that promoted through pop culture, to your point.
And that's exactly the point, because we can't seem to see how gullible we are
Yes.
as it pertains to what Hollywood preaches and teaches. Yes, I said preaches and teaches,
Yeah.
except they do it in the form of entertainment. I don't have a problem with a white man and a black woman marrying. My description is different. I'm saying that they are saying, go out and do this, go out and try this, which is very different than two people meeting, falling in love, marrying.
It's social engineering.
Exactly.
That's what it is. It's exactly what it is.
Thank you very much.
If you think about everything we've
And
described,
the same with religion, by the way.
exactly, it is a form of social engineering.
Yes.
How is social engineering Christianity led us to this point? Because you'll notice that we continue to point out the culprits in all of this, including people within the church. Again, we go back to Karl Popper and the idea of the post-war consensus of openness. In essence, it told a Christian society, a Christian nation, the way that you practice your Christianity is by allowing these persons in your midst. And they even took a lot of Christian concepts and turned them on their head. But we have been stating, you've been stating for a lot longer than I have, that there is no commandment in the Bible that tells us, as a matter of fact, all the opposite is true. The Bible tells us that if you engage in promoting anything that goes contrary to the gospel, you're committing not only spiritual adultery, you're making yourself a co-participant in the works of darkness. John himself says that if you wish a person whom does not bring the gospel, as it were, does not share in the ideas of the gospel with you, if you say to them, Godspeed, you're a co-participant in the evil with them. But a lot of Christians were constantly pontificated, like you said, in the modern age by Rick Warren and others. No. The way that we reach the world is by allowing all of these elements to come in among us, and that way we share the love of Christ with them. Curiously enough, though, when you consider what this sharing of the love of Christ means, it means just come in here, but you can continue to have your faith. You can continue to live out your faith. And interestingly enough, one of those groups that we have told, come into our midst and share your faith freely in our nation, in a nation that should be for Christians, is one of those religions that in their texts, it openly says that one of the hostilities that the Islamists, that Muslims have to take out against are what they call the people of the book. Sure, they include Jews in there, but there's a particular contempt against Christians because we do not recognize Muhammad as the prophet. We do not recognize Allah. We call him a false god, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a series of prescriptions for Islamists where it even includes a concept known as taqiyya or taqiyya, depending on whom you ask and how they pronounce it, where it says an Islamist and Islamists are allowed to infiltrate themselves into a country, lie about what their religion teaches until they begin to grow in the background. And once they take control of that society, then you take these people whom they would consider infidels and submit them under the threat of punishment of death, under a sin tax and things of that nature. I mean, we've seen this in the Middle East, and they're attempting to do the same thing here in the United States.
So if you think that we're making up stuff and that this hasn't happened anywhere, therefore we have no evidence to prove that this is happening. All you have to do is take a look at our neighbors across the pond, talking about the British, and how in a place called Whitechapel, which in reality is a no-go zone.
Yeah.
What is a no-go zone? The Muslims now own it, and they don't want anybody that's Muslim to be involved in that area. The Anglican Church in England insists that England is still a Christian country, and yet UKIP has tried to carry out 2 marches in Whitechapel and the authorities have said under no circumstances are we going to allow these walk with Jesus, march for Jesus demonstrations to happen. Why not? Because Whitechapel is mostly Muslim, Bangladeshi people from Bangladesh, which, by the way, is a Muslim country to the tune of 91%. Why are they in England? Why are they in this nation that, according to the Anglican Church, is a Christian country? And now Christians can't go there to have a march. So you see, we do have evidence. Tolerance. We do have evidence, and we have places that we can point to where this has happened, and it's happening here also. So if you sit back and listen to the evidence, I think you'll be able to land where we are at, and that is, unless we do something about this, we're going to get Dearborn in many different places here.
Yep.
Tampa is starting to get a bit shady, by the way.
Texas.
Yes, indeed. And so, again, if you pay attention and you look at the evidence that is popping up here and there, you will notice that it's not just England, it's not just certain places in Europe, it's happening here in the States. And you ask yourself, how did this happen? Well, we've been trying to explain since this program started how this is carried out, how it's brought into a country. And the next thing you know, we will have no-go zones here everywhere. We have some now. Try to get yourself into Dearborn whenever they have their celebrations.
And Christians have tried, by the way.
You will be kicked out of there,
Yes.
and you will be asked, not so nicely, to leave or else. So how can we allow this as Christians to continue to go on? And to your point, Gio, about the exclusivity of Jesus. Well, there's two sides to that coin. When I hear the exclusivity of Jesus, I hear, I am the way, the truth, and the life, not one way, one particular truth, and one of many lives. There is a call to protect, to defend the exclusivity of Jesus. And so I'm not going to go around embracing or having my faith embrace another faith and say, this is what Jesus would have me do. No, what Jesus would have me do is tell the world he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life.
Also, it doesn't require Christians, all the opposite is true, to begin to invite people whom are hostile and to their faith and also hostile to Christ to come and live amongst us. That is a false dichotomy. That's something that people like Russell Moore and others have been preaching for years, but that's nowhere to be found in the text. This is why I said earlier, we stated earlier, that the open society concept that was advanced by Karl Popper and others, they hijacked a lot of the Christian principles, turned them on their heads, and gave them a new definition that Christ himself never gave them. I have an explanation, and I'd like to give it to the audience shortly, about how freedom of religion, the concept itself, which was not supposed to be applied, as it were, to anyone else except for Christians in the country, was hijacked also by certain groups, leading to the point where we're at now, where freedom of religion is used to stamp out Christianity in the United States. I'd like to explain that shortly, but first and foremost, one of the things that we'd like to show the audience is a video which was reposted by another YouTube commentator, which comes from one of Dinesh D'Souza's documentaries. And I know some of you, with what Dinesh has been saying lately on social media, have been saying, you're going to feature Dinesh D'Souza on this. We have our says, we're now featuring him.
We're using a piece of something that he did that helps point to or confirm what we're tackling here.
In one of his recent documentaries, he interviews a so-called moderate imam. When you read a thing or two about Islam, there is no such thing. But this is how this cleric, Muslim cleric, presents himself. Listen to what he has to say about Islamists and how they try to take over a country and, in essence, turn it towards Sharia law.
This is what they actually believe.
When I was an extremist Islamist, I would only...
Why is that?
I saw them as very stupid. I would fear the conservatives because they come with principle. That's not someone they can brainwash. But the left, I know they have no values and no principles to begin with. I dare you to find one Islamic extremist that votes for Donald Trump. They'd give their vote to the leftist. who wants to run around in pride parades. And Islamic extremists are against gays and homosexuals and transgenders, but they want the left to go and get busy with that. They want them, go speak about the climate, go speak about abortion, go kill yourselves, go do that.
What is the fundamentalist and jihadi agenda for America?
The future of America has to be.
Seems like it stopped here. In essence, he goes on to state that in essence, the future for what Islam wants for the United States is to completely Islamify it in one shape or
To
form.
be Muslim. He went on to say it.
Exactly. Allow me to say this because I do take issue with some of the words and the framing that Dinesh posits here. Dinesh uses the language from the left to now frame what is happening with Islam. I don't know how many years, and for those of us that have been in the apologetics and polemics game for some time now, we've gotten used to the fact that people have called us fundamentalist, but using it in a pejorative sense. In other words, in a negative sense. And we've had to teach Christians throughout the years that there's nothing wrong with being a fundamentalist. It's just a shame tactic to get you to back away from defending what is fundamental to the Christian faith. So when you're saying that a person is a fundamentalist of whatever belief system that they say they adhere to, you're just talking about a person whom, as it were, believes the very fundamental things of that thing. But of course, since most people don't take the time to realize that words have meanings, and there are certain persons who like to twist the definitions of words. This is why I take issue with the presentation from Dinesh here and the questions that he has for this cleric. You'll notice that the cleric even accepts that framing and says, when I used to be an extremist, here's the problem. According to Islam, what this cleric himself is saying is necessarily heretical against what the Quran teaches, because it is against homosexuality. It does prescribe certain things against homosexuality, is against abortion, so-called, in certain senses, as it were, but not in others, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at the way that Dinesh frames it, he comes at it from an ecumenical standpoint, going back to what you were talking about, Rick Warren, and a whitewashing of Islam, where he tries to make it, as it were, acceptable to Christian audiences.
Why should I believe the cleric when taqiyya is probably in play?
Yep.
What are you talking about? Muslims are allowed to lie if it will improve their possibilities of establishing Islam wherever they're trying to install it. Is that true? You don't have to take my word for it. Check it for yourself. So he's saying, when I was an extremist, when I was out there, he's still out there. At the end of the video, it's too bad that it got cut off there. He said that the project, the goal for the Muslims as it pertains to the United States of America is to turn it Muslim.
Yes.
So
That's the exact truth. Yeah.
if you think, well, he's not an extremist anymore, he's a moderate now.
We're just taking his word for it, or anybody's taking his word
But
for it. That doesn't mean it.
Again, listen to what they teach. They are allowed to lie.
Yep.
It's a license to lie if it will improve their chances to establish Islam.
I said earlier that I'd like to bring a word or two on freedom of religion, and I hope that the audience follows my thread here, because I think Christians for many years in this country have been fed a lie about what freedom of religion actually means in an American context. And these redefinitions and reframing of these ideas from their original sense have convinced Christians that somehow it is our Christian duty to drop, as we were saying earlier, the exclusivity of Christ in the name of reaching the nations, whatever that nebulous phrase means to the people whom are promoting it. When you think about it, you read, for example, the Declaration of Independence. You read what John Jay, who's a Christian, one of the first Supreme Court justices in our country, wrote in one of the Federalist Papers. They were very clear, especially John Jay, when he says that it is seen good to providence, and that's the term that they used respectfully to talk about God, that he has given this land to a people whom share an ethnicity, a race, but he also says a faith. And that faith, of course, is Christianity. He says, and we have created this nation for our posterity. So it makes it clear, John Jay wasn't the only one that wrote this, but others wrote that they had created a nation for people whom were Christian in their beliefs, in their behaviors, in their thought processes, that this regulated, as it were, their comportment, and this would regulate the way that they would be in civic life. But if you think about it then, especially after the 20th century, that began, the people whom taught us, as it were, freedom of religion, began to turn that on its head. So it was no longer, the government cannot involve itself in how you worship God in a Christian context. Now it became, you have to allow all the other religions of the world, especially those that are outright enemies to Christianity, to not only come into this country, but also to outright look to tamp out the very faith that whose adherents created this nation for the future. So if you think about it, they took freedom of religion, they twisted it in knots and convinced 20th century Christians and on, even though there had been some movements to try to do that before the 20th century, but it picked up steam, in the progressive era. Christians eventually bought into that idea where now it almost became a part of Christianity. I have to accept these people in my midst.
This is why I bring up Rick Warren.
Exactly.
Why would a Christian pastor have what he called conversations, but as you look to his proceedings, it went beyond conversations with Islam? So you wouldn't have conversations with people from the Islamic faith. I would preach the gospel to them.
Right.
I remember one time I got in trouble because I said something to the effect of, if I was invited to go to Rome and visit the Pope in Vatican City, I would take the invitation. And people said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "Let me finish." And I would sit there and I would preach the gospel to the Pope.
Yeah.
Of course, now I just offended maybe a couple hundred people, a few thousand, I don't know. Why you think he needs salvation? Absolutely. Absolutely. But anyway, if I'm going to have a conversation with a Muslim, you might want to use that word. I know what it means in political circles. I know what it means in the ecumenical circles. It means yielding space to them. But if I am to have a conversation with a Muslim, it's to preach Christ.
Right.
The Muslim probably thinks, I'm going to have a conversation with this guy and I'll preach Muhammad. That's the extent of it. You mean to tell me there can't be a conversation so we can coexist? We are coexisting already. But the issue is they want to make you believe that it's about coexistence, when in reality, it's not about coexistence. It's about driving us out and establishing themselves as the faith. I was talking about Bangladesh.
Britain, you were just talking about it earlier. Look what they're doing there in a formerly Christian nation.
And look throughout Europe, countries that were at one point or another mostly Christians.
Yes.
Turkey.
Yes.
And then you look over to Turkey now and you go like, what happened there?
Syria was a formerly Christian nation.
And so if you think there is no history to prove our point, then all I can recommend is that you go and read a few books about Christianity and where it was established and what has happened to those nations now. And you would have to conclude that, yeah, this is happening and it continues to happen.
One of my exhortations for the audience is as follows. Don't let people, whether it be Russell Moore, whether it be Rick Warren, or any of these other charlatans, guilt you, shame you into thinking that I don't want these elements among us, first and foremost because they are a danger to the faith and to the adherents of the faith once and for all given to the saints. That's not a bad sentiment to have. It's not an anti-Christian sentiment to have. I find it interesting because these people have twisted Jesus's commandments. Let's presume here, because I know there's a lot of debates over the ending of Mark 16, if it is part of the original documents or not. Let's presume it is. And Jesus says, you're going to go into the nations and you're going to preach the gospel. I found it interesting that Jesus says, you go to the nations. Christians are supposed to go to the nations to preach the gospel. It never said invite the nations into your nation. That was not the commandment, but that has been, again, because of a secularization of the Christian faith in many ways, that has been flipped on its head to let's accept these subversive elements among us, where now they begin to do damage not only to the faith itself, but also to the adherents of Christianity. So one of my exhortations to the audience is don't let these people shame you and fool you into thinking that somehow you are less than a Christian if you're thinking, boy, I don't want these elements around me, around my family, around my church, because they are certainly first and foremost antagonistic toward the gospel, toward Christ, and then they are antagonistic toward the very people whom are adherent to Christ. This is one of the reasons that I think a lot of Christians are beginning to wake up, and thankfully it's about time, where they're starting to notice that it's not just Islam that's a problem toward Christianity, Judaism is a massive problem against Christianity and other, as it were, groups of people whom say that they can coexist with Christians, but in fact, what they want to do is stamp out Christianity altogether. That would be my first exhortation. My second exhortation is this: don't be afraid to, in your community, band together with other people whom are seeing the danger and speak out against these mosques that are going up, these events that they want to do, where they're looking, as it were, for city planners and the commission to give them the permissions to do these things. For crying out loud, a couple of weeks ago, we covered it. We showed it on one of our episodes, where it wasn't just in Dearborn. In other places, Alabama included, you would think, now there's no mosques going up there. They're actually doing the Islamic call to prayer more than 3 times a day, and they're blasting that from 5 in the morning. And guess how they're doing it? They're hiding behind, hey, this is our religion, and you can't do anything about it. You can't tamp, as it were, our freedom of religion on the matter. Notice how they essentially use what was designed for Christians against Christians, to the detriment of Christians, but to their benefit, in order to stamp out Christianity. Don't let these people, again, the Warrens of Life, Southern Baptist Convention, their hierarchy, whatever the case may be, don't let them guilt you into thinking that because you're fighting against this very thing, that you're somehow committing some cardinal sin against the gospel and against Jesus Christ.
As I read through the book of Acts, and I've had the opportunity to read the book of Acts a few times in my life, I see something that happened with the early church, and it's as follows, Gio. The sinners either converted, they became one with the Christians, or they feared the Christians. Read it for yourselves, and you will find it. And you're almost forced to ask yourself, what happened? What happened to the church where we are no longer respected?
Yeah.
And I believe the reply lies in all the things that we've been covering tonight, even way back to my first statement. If you pay attention to entertainment, and now I'm going to focus in on Christian entertainment, the way we copy the world, the Dove Awards and others, you see that the same system, the same mentality that set up a system to overthrow a society, to inculcate certain ideas, it's happening in the Christian family, in the Christian circle. And so you need to be aware of the popular ministries, the ones that have the popular podcasts. They're on TV, they're on the radio. What are they telling you? What are they preaching to you? I know at one point, the whole ball of them, the huge snowball of them, were into the whole idea of prosperity and prosperity and more prosperity. That has not gone away. But if you pay attention to what is happening now, the ecumenical mentality has made a comeback.
Yeah.
And we must coexist, and we must embrace these people. We must give them a place, of course, to sell you on the idea. They'll tell you is so that you can preach to them. You don't have to invite them in to preach to them. You go out to them to preach to them, and you allow them in only if you see conversion and fruit. So be very, very careful. That's my admonishment to you as it pertains to Christian entertainment and the Christian industry that has to do with Christian music, because there's a lot of this at play. And next thing you know, you will consume the Kool-Aid, and you will be repeating the things that make you not a person that respects the exclusivity of Christ, but to the contrary, you make Christ one of many, to the point that next time you look up, the only one that is outside of that circle that you have helped created is Christ.
You know, I said I had that final exhortation for the audience, but this, you just mentioned something that triggers something in my own mind that I'm going to add to what I recently said. And it is this: take the time to read the Quran. You don't have to read it all in one sitting. Just by saying that, I know some of you are regurgitating and saying, Gio is asking me to engage in heretical acts. I've read the Quran. He's read the Quran. We've read the Book of Mormon. We've read the Pearl of Great Price. We have not lost our salvation for doing so.
You've lost your way, Jim.
Right? We're not doing it, as it were, because we're suddenly questioning our faith, and we're thinking maybe we're doing a switch of faiths, like people do trades, as it were, in the MLB between teams. That's not the point. The point is, if you're going to know who these people are, what their designs are, whether it be for the faith once and for all given to the saints, or for a person who subscribes to the faith once for all given to the saints, like the audience is. You need to know what it is that they believe. Read these things firsthand. Don't take it from us. Don't take it from anyone else. Read these things, and you'll notice that as you begin to read, you're thinking, this was hidden from me. Why didn't Rick Warren tell me this about this group, even though he was trying to promote it as we can live in harmony with these people? Why is it that this person didn't tell me this? Russell Moore didn't tell me this about this group, because he keeps telling me that the messaging here is peace and harmony with these people, yet they want the outright destruction of the faith once for all given to the saints and for the people who subscribe to the faith. These are things that we have advocated for years, but unfortunately, in a few instances, they've fallen on deaf ears, because it's easier to just listen to whatever the personality has to say on the matter. And yeah, I'll accept that without actually going to the firsthand knowledge of the thing to extract the information and have it for yourself and use it for the impetus that you need to defend, as it were, Christianity proper and defend your family as well.
Amen.
That's what we have for the audience on this edition of Irrespective. We want to thank you for watching. A couple of reminders before we sign off. First and foremost, do not forget to subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on Rumble, if you're watching this on X, and you're not subscribed yet, please, we encourage you to do so. If you're watching this on Rumble and YouTube, hit the notification bell to be alerted as to when we go live next, which is Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Do not forget to share our content with others and click on the thumbs up button. Don't forget to donate also. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner on the screen that you can scan. Conversely, there's a link underneath the video player that you can click on, which will lead you to PayPal services, which we use to process those donations. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on X at Irrespective77. At Irrespective77 is our handle there. That's all the time we have left for this edition. We hope that you have been edified and informed by what we have to offer on this episode. For my co-belligerent, Jesus, this has been Gio. We will gather again on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the next edition of Irrespective. Until then, may the Lord shine his face upon you.